Good morning, everybody. My name is Matt Walker. I'm the Director of Foundation Relations at the University of Memphis. And I just want to welcome you today to our webinar about the African American Male Academy. It's a very exciting program that we have going on here at the university that is making a tremendous impact in the lives of many of our students, and appreciative of your support and appreciative of the buy-in that you have with our program here. And just wanted to spend a few minutes of time this morning kind of bringing you up to date on what's going on with the African American Male Academy. Our panelists today include Dr. Karen Weddle-West, the Vice President for Student Academic Success here at the university. Also, Dr. Gregory Washington, the Director of the Center for Advancement in Youth Development, a program advisor for the Benjamin Hooks Institute for Social Change, African American Male Initiative, and a full professor in the Department of Social Work. And Dr. Brian Wright, Associate Professor and Program Coordinator of Early Childhood Education in the Department of Instruction and Curriculum Leadership in the College of Education and Coordinator of the Middle School Cohort of the African American Male Academy. Panelists, thank you all so much for your time this morning. And Dr. Weddle-West, I will turn it over to you to kind of kick us off.
Well, good morning, everyone. It is true that we could not have the levels of success that we have achieved and the programming associated with that without wonderfully supportive partners like you. We're so pleased to have this program. It was actually created following a successful testimony from President Wright to Congress regarding the importance of understanding that most African American males have the lowest graduation rate from universities across the country, not due to anything other than the fact primarily that they run out of money, more likely to run out of money more frequently than other demographics. Most African American males who attend four-year institutions are receiving the federal Pell Grants, and those don't go past the fourth year. Those are $6,000, $6,300 maximum. They don't cover the entire year of any particular university. So most of our African-American males have to work in addition to going to school, and often also supporting and taking care of families. That really interferes with a timely 4, 5, 6 year to degree completion. For example, last year we graduated 274 African-American males, 75% of whom were Pell Grant recipients. That's the largest demographic of Pell Grant recipients that we have. 60% of them worked off campus, and more than 48% were first generation. So it's a lot of hurdles and a lot of challenges. So David testified before Congress and found that through our data, when we awarded the Memphis Advantage Scholarship, which is an access and diversity scholarship, we could change that rate from a low of 30%, 27%, to a high of what we saw last time, 68% for those African Americans who received a $4,000 scholarship annually to go to school. So it truly does make the difference. It's the tipping point. It's not, money's not everything. It's clearly not everything, but it is important that we have that in place. So following that testimony, then we created and realized that we had at least 17 existing student support programs already at the University of Memphis. Dr. Washington is part and director of one of them. And on our flow charts, we have all 17 programs listed. We call that a culture of inclusive excellence. Each of these programs, the Hooks African American Male Initiative, the MLK 50 Fellows Program, the Black Scholars Program, the Empowering Men of Color Program in different offices, the TL SAP for minority participation in engineering. These in different offices in different colleges and schools now come together, and they comprise our faculty and staff advisory board for the African American Male Academy. This culture of inclusive excellence allows us to realize some efficiencies and some synergies when we come together and begin to talk about ways that we can strategically sponsor joint programs, can all participate in this. It's important that every program has an impact, but it's more important that each program focuses on graduating African-American males, many of whom won't be involved in any organization because of their busy schedule. So there are 3 cohorts that comprise the middle school, the African-American Male Academy. We knew we needed to start early with the middle school component. Many recruitment programs start 11th and 12th grade. That's certainly too late to make an impression and to create a pipeline. So we knew we had to start at the middle school level. And what's equally important to consider about Black and brown males is that they are almost 4 times more likely to not complete high school than other demographics. So we wanted to catch people before they actually dropped out. And so we did that. We came together, and these directors who comprise this culture of inclusive excellence selected these 50 applicants for our first middle school cohort. These directors, many of whom are African-American men who hold doctoral degrees, are often donning their regalia whenever they have an opportunity to present themselves before these populations, because what we do know is that most African-American young boys have not had the opportunity to witness African-American male scholars, PhD holders in regalia, and understand that we need to cultivate early this identity of a scholar. Yes, you can do well in all other areas. Yes, you can do well in all other areas, but you may not realize that you also can easily achieve, with help and support, a doctoral degree and become a scholar. So that's the purpose of the Early Middle School Institute. We also had a goal for the existing group of African-American male students, whereas we are 20th in the country in graduating African-Americans in general, and we've held that distinction for quite some time in the top 20. What we did know is that for us even, we needed to close the completion gap between African-American males and other males graduating from the University of Memphis. So we went from a gap of more than 30% 3 years ago to 20% 2 years ago to 10%, closing the gap 1 year ago. And we are steadily making progress in equity in terms of graduation rates for African-American males, as well as males of other races. And we do that because we customize and tailor the support and present programming to meet the needs of the African-American male students. And then, of course, we have one of the largest population of graduate students. So that's our 3rd cohort, graduate students and law school students. One of the largest populations of African-Americans to graduate from those programs. And indeed, this year in particular, we enrolled 239 African-American males in our graduate programs and law school programs. No other university can talk about those kinds of numbers in terms of the graduate level. We really have received national recognition for having diversity throughout, but particularly at the graduate level. And the culture of inclusive excellence for that include the same kind of faculty and staff, but also some specific areas of early intervention, a bridge program for law school students, and we're moving and getting more and more involvement with mentoring and research communities for African-American males at the graduate level. So these are some of the ways that we have come together to create this culture of inclusive excellence. And we have already witnessed some successes in terms of increasing graduation rates, closing gaps, and being able to early identify sources of need and resources for those students so that they can successfully complete their degrees in a timely manner.
All right, thank
Can I ask one question?
Dr. Weddle-West. Yes.
Just curious, when you mentioned that about how high the number is for African-American males in graduate programs at University of Memphis, you said that was kind of like #1 in the country?
Not #1 in the country, but we are #1 in many programs at our graduate level. But this particular number, I'll send you a link later for the National Center for Educational Statistics.
Okay.
that kind of show how other programs across the country, for example, it's not unusual for many programs to have less than 5% African Americans enrolled throughout their entire university population, other than the HBCUs.
Okay.
And so for the longest, Diverse Magazine, which is the premier magazine that keeps track of enrollment of students of color, has always given us our rankings, and we can see how we rank across other, in comparison to other institutions. And what we know, because we have such a good internal research, Office of Institutional Research, is that we've never admitted as many as 239 during one cohort this time. So we know that that's going to keep us at a very high level in ranking when we finally see what comes out for the enrollment of fall of 2021.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Dr. Weddle-West. Right now, I'd also like to introduce another panelist who has joined us, Mr. James Beasley, who's the FedEx African American Male Academy Fellow, and we'll be incorporating him into some of our Q&A shortly. Right now, though, I would like to ask Dr. Wright to bring us some updates about the middle school cohort journey. Let's talk about a little bit of the activities. What have they been up to? And we're excited to see this group advance, through high school and towards college.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I am happy to talk about the deliverables for the African American Male Academy. I think Dr. Weddle-West captured it compellingly, that for us, it's about representation, the importance of Black boys as early as middle school to see mirror images of them and what is possible for them as they have an opportunity to interact with African American males who are holders of the doctoral degree in a variety of different fields and disciplines. And so it mattered for us that we created and designed specifically a program that provided the African American boys with counter stories, with theories and paradigms and resources that really do allow us to reimagine Black boyhood, to really capture their promise, potential, and possibility. And so with that, we've had 13 Saturday experiences. These experiences, due to the pandemic, have happened for the most part virtually via Zoom. And we meet every third Saturday from 10 a.m. until 11:30. And through these experiences, it's been an opportunity for the African American boys to participate in active engagement so that we can capture and document their perspectives, their voices, and certainly their distinct experiences, even though they overlap in a variety of ways. But we gave them an opportunity to have voice and agency as we created these experiences. And so one of the first things that we did with Black boys was this getting to know you. And so through this process of getting to know you, each of the boys read a poem entitled Where I'm From. And so this poem was published by Rethinking Schools, and it's an opportunity for them to document a little bit about their cultural and personal identity. So they were able to talk about their communities, their families, things that they enjoy. And so from that experience, and I'm just going to touch on some of them, not all 13 experiences. Following that, they had an opportunity, because there was so much going on, as it continues to be the case in our world and certainly in the United States, with regard to Black boys and Black males and policing. And so we wanted to give them an opportunity because it was right after the murder of George Floyd that we knew that these kinds of thoughts and feelings were in the boys, and they were probably having conversations with their friends, with their families, and certainly paying attention to both local and national news. And so this second experience was entitled Young, Gifted, and a Black Boy. And so they had an opportunity to explore, what does it mean to be Black? What does it mean to be a boy? What does it mean to be a Black boy in Memphis, and certainly in the larger context? And so through this opportunity, we were, as a committee and staff, completely impressed with the manner in which each of the boys talked with such compelling examples of what they knew and understood about policing and the Black community or Black communities. And one example that sort of stays with me, and I think with everyone, I vividly recall one of the Black boys mentioning that he's growing up in a predominantly white neighborhood in the suburbs of Memphis. And one of his fears is going out into his community that's predominantly white. And because of his height, because of his size, and because of his changing of his voice, he's fearful that often when he's out, the adults in the neighborhood think that he is an adult male, when in fact he, at the time, 12, 13 years old. And so this corroborates and certainly affirms the literature on what happens to Black boys as early as preschool, and certainly in early care and education, in which they are adultified. So they are seen as older than they are. So boys as early as 10 years old are often mistaken for being adults. I think we all know the horrific and tragic story of Tamir Rice, who in Ohio was playing with a toy gun, and someone called and said there was an adult male in the local park playing with, wielding a gun. And so when the police arrived, I think we know the story, Tamir Rice, 12 years old, lost his life only a few years removed from early childhood. And so it's disturbing to think about this sort of ongoing trend. And so through this experience, the African-American male or boys, scholars as we call them, had an opportunity to really talk very honestly about their fears, about their concerns. And we tried to create the kind of space that really allowed for sensitivity, but also to engage them in controversial, sensitive topics, and in which we also had on hand one of our resident clinical psychologists, Dr. Rosie Bingham Davis, who was on hand in part because when you're having these kinds of conversations, you never know what will be triggered. And so we wanted the boys and families to have a recourse and a follow-up should the conversation spill over after our time together had ended. But we just felt that they were very astute and had a deep pulse for what was happening in the world, which for us was a sense of urgency to begin to rethink and reconsider how we planned and structured activities, so that in each time that we met, there was an opportunity to affirm and reaffirm their cultural identity, to really promote what it means to be a brilliant Black boy, what it means to really think about yourself in a positive way, and also providing them with examples of Black men, which I'll talk about the fourth experience, really skipping over right now the third experience, because we invited Mr. Marvin Ellison, the CEO of Lowe's. And so that was a wonderful opportunity. And we're calling that sort of segment of the experiences community voices, because we want the Black boys to know that within greater Memphis, there are brilliant Black men who have shared some of their fears and concerns growing up. And through supports from family, their community, and for Mr. Ellison, he talked a lot about his faith. He was able to succeed. And so he provided the boys with a number of life lessons but he also didn't talk at them. He created a space where they could ask questions. And one of the boys asked, "What would you tell your 13-year-old self?" And so he paused for a moment because he wanted to also say to that young man that that's a really good question. But he quickly then went on to say some of the things that he would have told himself in terms of perhaps listening to his parents a little more, paying more attention to things that were happening in his church growing up. And so just a lot of important life lessons. And so I think the boys were inspired and motivated to see someone who looked like them, who came from similar community as them. And so that was really inspiring. And from that, because we know that within the research literature that often African-American males, boys struggle with, and I'm being very deliberate to say boys because I don't want to engage in the practice. These are boys and they will be boys until they finish and become the official age to be referred to as an adult male. And so these Black boys we know that within the literature, often there are disparities and pushing out experiences with regard to why they may not perform well in mathematics and some of the other subjects. And so we know that that's a key player in terms of how students in general, Black boys in particular, perform around literacy and mathematics. And so these have been central foci within our experience. And so we've been deliberate and intentional about incorporating math. And so Black boys doing mathematics by connecting with one of our professors, Dr. Segan George, and certainly his connections to teachers out in Shelby County schools that have also come to visit as a community voice to educate and engage the boys in doing mathematics. And so some other experiences that included community voices. During the month of February, we commemorated the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King, and we allowed the boys to also focus on Black girl magic. So they were able to identify a Black girl or a woman that has inspired them. And we had Candy Hill Clark, the Dean of the College of Education, who came as one of our guest speakers and engaged the boys in telling her story, which was also powerful because she grew up in Memphis. She went to Lemoyne-Owen, historically Black college here in our great city. And she was able to talk to them about her experiences, both as growing up as a Black girl in Memphis, what it meant to go on to college and to ascend to this highest level as an administrator, as a dean. And so I think for that, the boys were, again, inspired to talk very compellingly about their mothers being nurses and doctors, their grandmothers, their aunts, their female cousins. So it was a really powerful time together as they celebrated Black girl magic, because we also want, it's important that we cultivate that sort of respect and celebration of not just Black boys, but also Black girls, Black women, etc. One of the experiences that that I'll talk about now is the experience 11, when we invited the boys and their families to an on-campus visit. So that took place in the spring in May. And so they came with their families, we had lunch. They were able to meet us in person for the first time, live and in living color. And so it was a wonderful opportunity for them to engage in some artwork around capturing themselves in terms of the theme was when they see us. And so we were challenging and pushing back against the narrative of when they see us, they often see what they're not, as opposed to the brilliance that we certainly know resides in our Black boys and Black girls. And so it was an opportunity for them to do self-portraits, to present them to the group. And also they participated in a pre-ACT test, which was towards the end. And then it was just a wonderful day that we took the families on a tour of the campus. The boys got a tour of the campus. And then there was an opportunity for the families to ask questions of us and for us to engage them as we think about the trajectory. And I'll share one of our last experiences, which just happened. We engaged the boys in what is called a Black Boys Book Club. And so they are reading the book by Abram Kendi, who's a professor at the university, at Boston University. And he's written several books, from Stamped for Adults, and he more recently wrote the bestseller Stamped for Kids. And so that was a donation by Dr. Beverly Cross, who's the Moss Chair of Excellence in Urban Education in the College of Education. So she was another one of our community voices, though not a native Memphian, has been here long enough to claim that that status. And so she, along with my support, we engaged the boys in a very deep conversation about what they were learning from Abram Kendi's book, which is quite powerful. And that was certainly a donation by Dr. Cross to give each boy a book. And so when we return in the spring, in February 2022, we will continue with that. And we created a graffiti wall in which, based on what the boys shared about the experiences and what they got from the book, we started to take their descriptions and put them on a graffiti wall. And of course, you can transform the text into graffiti text. And so we're going to return to that to have a discussion. And another thing before I end, we engaged the boys in an identity box. And so this was an opportunity for them to select any kind of box, decorate that box to capture the ways in which people see them, and all the things inside of the box are the things in which people don't know about them. And so they did a compelling job of decorating boxes and presenting them. And that's going to be an ongoing thing, in part because due to time, we don't often get an opportunity for all of the 40 plus boys to present. And so we carve out time in each experience so that they can present. But I think overall, we've created this opportunity that that's safe for the boys, that allows them to be brave and to engage in intellectual discourse and dialogue, but more importantly, to affirm who they are. And their families often witness, because they're on with them, the ways in which we've structured opportunities for the boys to both learn, to ask questions, to be critical, and to think complicatedly about issues that matter to them. And I think at the heart of this is making sure that we continue to affirm who they are and celebrate what it means to be Black in a world that's often anti-Black, so that they understand that they matter, and that their experiences, perspectives, and realities are central to what we do in terms of the African American Male Academy. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Dr.
When you had Marvin Ellison speak, did he speak just to this group, or was he talking to another bigger, broader group?
No, he only spoke to the boys. And so he set aside time to come and talk with them. And so he really structured the time in a way that was engaging to the boys as opposed to a lecture.
Okay. You taped it so that you could share it with others, because I mean, I think when you have access to someone like him, it's good to have a broader audience to share it with.
Yeah, so we've recorded all of our sessions for the most part, for documentation purposes, going back for purposes for research, et cetera. So, yeah.
And is the focus of the students that you have that are involved in this program, is it more for STEM fields, or is it for all types of education?
So I think we've opened this up to all possibilities. And so while STEM is science and mathematics within the STEM acronym are critical, we certainly have learned from our boys early on in that first session and getting to know them, that many of them come with a wide range of desires, from wanting to be artists, wanting to be a number of things. So we create opportunities for all of that.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't hear you mention anything about kind of things that are arts related. So I was curious about that, and I'll just offer something that I saw. I was heavily involved with some schools up in the Detroit area.
Mhm.
And one of the things that they had was they had kind of a concept called a musical petting zoo, because they realized that many of the Black students had never actually touched a saxophone or a piano or something like that. And they had musical interest, but they never actually had an instrument because they couldn't afford them. And so they had a day where people could actually come and touch these different band instruments. And if they had interest in that, they could have follow-up conversations about how they could either get one on loan or get some lessons and guitar or whatever. So I just offer that up as something to consider, because it was very powerful. That most people assume that people have access to these instruments and they don't.
Right. So I appreciate that. I think you're getting into my spring schedule
Okay.
because we're going to be inclusive of all of those things. We've done some art as in painting, drawing, etc. But I like this idea. And I think in a place like Memphis, where obviously as students are also learning, they're learning historically and sociopolitically, all of the ways in which Memphis has been this sort of international place for people to learn, not just about historical facts, but certainly the power of music, given many of great jazz and blues singers have come out of the city, and all of the ways in which music is centrally located here.
Sure. Well, thank you for the information. I mean, I love the sounds of your program.
Thank you.
And I might add, Mr. Webb, Dr. Wright is always modest in his presentation, but his scholarship, his books on the books, plural, have been nationally recognized because people don't often talk about, and he documents it and archives it and researches it, the scholarship, the brilliance of Black boys, so that it's a strengths-based approach that dominates everything we do. We don't focus on or even talk about the deficits that often are associated with African-American male achievement. We don't even do that because we realize that the power of positive identity and being able to feel competent and have mastery of any educational endeavor is based first on the belief and the kind of support that people give you, that your forefathers and ancestors were the developers and the creators of most of the traditional math concepts that we use today. And that was part of one of their sessions as well, when they looked back to see some of the African masters of mathematics, so that any fears that people might have would certainly be environmental, that they had heard the wrong messages from the wrong people. So it's done a brilliant job in doing that. And I'll tip my hat and hand to share something that probably Joanna doesn't even know. We are bringing on board Ephraim Yerube, who's a brilliant artist, and he will be an artist in residence, an African American who has documented quite a bit of the history and stories of 2020, and will engage with not only this academy, but certainly with this academy as we move forward. So yes, the importance of all of the areas. And the other thing that we can share, Kim and Matt, if you'd like to, when we inducted the boys into, which had to be also virtual at the time due to the pandemic, they listed their ambitions, career aspirations. And we were amazed that, yes, that was your traditional, like any other 8th grade boy, basketball player, football player, whatever. But there were equally high levels of those kinds of careers that typically aren't associated with African-American boys. So we were already pleased with what some of their teachers and parents had done to cultivate a scholarly identity, which is very important for us. And then I will shut up, but I'm so proud of the fact that not only the monies have helped out, but Dr. Rudd, Loretta Rudd, and David Rudd created the Dr. Karen Weddle-West Scholarship, Completion Scholarship, so that when these boys enter the University of Memphis, then their tuition will be covered by that scholarship.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Dr. Weddle-West, and thank you, Dr. Wright, for sharing a little bit about the middle school journey. This time, I would like to bring on Mr. Beasley, our FedEx African American Male Academy Fellow. Mr. Beasley, if you don't mind, just share a little bit about your experience in this position and the work that you're doing to synchronize our efforts across campus as far as, moving the needle on completion.
Most certainly, most certainly. First of all, thank you all. I had a little technical difficulty this morning, so please forgive me for coming on a couple minutes late. Working with the Academy has been one of the highlights of my time here at the University of Memphis. I began my time here as an undergrad, working with the Academy at the time for a project known as a graduation coach. Seeing the efforts and the work that the Academy actually produces, actually what caused me to change my major as an undergrad to get into the higher educational field. As the fellow and currently seeking my graduate degree, one of my biggest endeavors has been bridging the gap between the undergraduate experience and continuing education. Also the mentoring aspect of getting over that hump. What we notice is during the junior year, a lot of students are beginning to struggle. They're getting a little fatigued mentally, having the motivation to continue to push themselves to actually graduate. My job is actually to encourage these students to communicate with these students, actually communicate with these students to let them know that we are here to support them in their endeavors, whether it is the tutoring aspect of it, the creating an avenue for them to speak to their professors, or even help them find completion scholarships through your financial efforts. Over the last semester, we have been able to positively affect over 200 students currently that will be graduating. And there's a couple graduation on the 12th, which is a great thing to actually see them make it across the finish line. And several of those students now have already applied and have been accepted into the University of Memphis in various graduate programming. I myself will be graduating soon as well, thanks to the efforts of the Academy. And I will be looking forward to continuing my education and pursuing my doctoral degree. I think it's important for us to teach students that your circumstances do not have to be the things that hinder you from moving forward. That it is okay for you to have trials, and actually those trials and tribulations are the things that you are able to share with students that propel them as well. It is the human aspect of it. Oftentimes we view our administration or our professors as individuals that have completed these tasks that are far removed from our circumstances. That is not always the case. So the Academy has made it easier for students to bridge these gaps by getting to actually speak to individuals such as Dr. Washington, Dr. Wright, Dr. Weddle-West, Dr. Rudd. We actually able to engage these people on a daily basis, and they actually give great insight that pushes students further. The graduation rates are closing in every year. We will continue to move efforts. We're looking to implement a plan starting in the spring semester to bring back the mentoring aspects of aligning graduate students with undergraduate students so they can mentor them along the way. And using the middle school, bringing them into the college environment, we're able to track these students along the way. They're not just a one and done situation. They actually know that people are in line with them to help push them along the way.
Thank you, Mr. Beasley. I appreciate your dedication to this program and the work you're doing here to help us close the gap.
Thank you.
And I'd like to ask Dr. Washington to come on at this time and tell us a little bit more about the mentorship model program, or excuse me, mentorship model plans and the impacts that program's had so far. Dr. Washington.
Well, thank you. Good morning. Is my sound okay?
You sound great.
Good, good. Well, I want to thank you for this opportunity, and especially for this opportunity to thank Dr. Weddle-West, Dr. Ryan Wright, and our fellow James Beasley for their tremendous leadership. They've been doing some outstanding work, and I've appreciated the opportunity to kind of rejoin this leadership group. We've worked together in the past, and I've been in a different role for a while, but to be able to come back and be in the presence of these elders, and sometimes when I talk about our mentors and colleagues as elders, because they have wisdom that is important for me to utilize and is important for me to share. It's important for us to have relationships so we can talk back and forth. And that's kind of a real important model that I try to utilize and follow. So the plans, James talked a little bit about some of our intentions and efforts to utilize some of our, we'll call them junior elders, our graduate students, our mentors who are actively at the next level of education and have insight and wisdom that they can share with undergrads. So, and I've talked about some of this work as pyramid mentoring. I've kind of utilized that model and approach and written about it. So if you just kind of envision a pyramid with the undergrads at the top and the energy flow from senior elders or faculty, that may be me, and then junior elders or graduate students, that may be Mr. Beasley and others, all pouring our understanding, information, and insight into these undergrads, but also that energy flow comes back down to us too. So in that kind of approach is what we're kind of envisioning as we kind of move forward. And we've done some of this work face to face, but we're going to be having hybrid models and be able to do telehealth versions of this. But what we're looking to do ultimately is provide these opportunities for interactions between the graduate students, the faculty, and the undergraduates. We want to support their journey to completion of their scholarship, at least this level. But we also want to provide opportunities where appropriate for them to be engaged in discussions that challenge existing beliefs and thoughts that may be barriers, thoughts as wide as ideas about manhood, masculinity, school, and relationships that may be barriers to them completing their degree. So what we're talking about when we create these spaces, the mentoring spaces, they've got to be safe spaces where we can afford a level of trust and understanding, where our young men can feel comfortable sharing uniqueness of being a Black male and being in an academy and being in an academic environment. Dr. Wright talked very eloquently about some of the challenges that Black males face in some of these spaces. And so having graduate students who have managed to successfully navigate some of that and also made decisions about which way they want to go. We talked about disciplines and why STEM disciplines are important. It's also important to understand that some of these young men will be very valuable educators, that they'll be very valuable social workers, that they will be business owners and leaders. So again, putting them in touch with graduate students in those disciplines and faculty can be very valuable. And that's what we're looking to do. And lastly, I'll say one of the things that becomes important as these undergraduates are on this journey is that they have relationships with men like Mr. Beasley and others they can talk to and that they can pull upon when needed. Maybe some of that happens during our formal mentoring events, like we're planning actually next week. We're going to have a mentoring event, peer mentoring event. And this one is really more designed to kind of get prepared to do more of this. So we want feedback and understanding from those graduate students who I understand have expressed a very significant interest in wanting to be available. And so we want to take advantage of their wisdom and understanding and understand how we should move forward. But also, hopefully, some of the undergraduates will establish valuable mentoring relationships as they move forward to completing their degree, but also specific demystifying of how they progress into their particular discipline. So I'm looking forward to continuing to again work with these strong leaders and elders that are part of the academy. And I'm going to leave it there.
Thank you, Dr. Washington. I appreciate your leadership on this team as well. I know our time together this morning is drawing short, so John and other donors on the call, I certainly want to make sure that you guys have a chance to ask any additional questions that you might have. I have a few questions that I'll go ahead and kick off. Really, Dr. Wright, you mentioned that John kind of alluded to some of your spring activities. What's next for the new 8th grade cohort, and what's the cohorts that are aging out? What's kind of their process from here, and how do they interact with the new cohort?
So we were intentional about not bringing in a cohort of 8th graders each year, because from national programs that I, in the process of creating and designing this program, I know from research and those programs that exist both on the East Coast and certainly the West Coast, that boys are brought in biennially. So every 2 years, a new cohort is introduced. And the purpose of that is a year goes by very quickly. And so it takes certainly a lot of time to develop relationships that are authentic, that are meaningful with any students, but in this case, Black boys. And so we wanted to certainly have them for their entire 8th grade year, and certainly move them into 9th grade where they are now, and continue to work with them. And so that when we're ready for the next group that will come, they will be 8th graders, and we certainly will see a model that already exists where there'll be 10th graders at that time, where they become mentors to the 8th graders that are coming in, both in terms of sharing their experiences thus far in the program, but also listening to the 8th graders and offering up some advice from their own experiences. And so we see this is a wonderful opportunity where they are certainly lifting as they climb, that they're also providing perspectives, experiences, and realities about them in terms of, as we think about the planning of activities. I think we're going to continue with a focus on math, because we know that that's essential as we think about the 10th graders, as well as the 8th graders will be thinking ahead, planning ahead as they think about post-secondary experiences. And so the goal is that they will come certainly to the University of Memphis, but we know that we're also creating a space and opportunity for them to attend whatever four-year institution, post-secondary experience that they, in consultation with their parents, their guidance counselors, will do. Many of the activities that are forthcoming, again, will also be around creating a space for them to have conversations about things that matter to them. I think Mr. Webb mentioned the tapping into the arts. We know that within our group that many of them are interested in music. Many of them play instruments. And so we definitely want to create this space in which we're not sort of creating what often happens in these experiences where they become, quote, boy things, which are done at the exclusion of boys who are not interested in football, who are not interested in sports, but they have other interests. And so we want to be expansive in sending the message that there are many kinds of ways to be who you are and to express yourself through a variety of different ways. And so while the arts will be a focus, mathematics will be a focus, continually having conversations for them to talk about things that matter to them. As Memphis and other places have opened up, we initially had opportunities for them to go to have a tour of the National Civil Rights Museum, to go to the Underground Railroad Museum here, to experience culinary experiences in some of the more premier restaurants that exist in downtown Memphis, to expose them to a lot of what exist in our city, from the Dixon Museum, which often has amazing exhibits. One of my colleagues and professors here, Ernestine Jenkins, has had an ongoing exhibit there that documents Black experiences, both in Memphis and certainly nationally. And having had an opportunity to go to that exhibit and to purchase one of her books that documents that experience. So all of those opportunities, and really thinking about having her to come. And so I think some of the limitations happen as a result of the pandemic. And so we had many other opportunities for them to be out in the community, which is really how programs nationally certainly work, where it's not simply lecture and sort of inside experiences, but we're also giving them an opportunity to learn more about the city in which they live, and to learn about Memphis' national as well as international standing. And so as I am thinking about activities, and sometimes things, I can plan out this wonderful schedule of activities, but it's sort of like a pastor in a Black church, and you would have to attend a Black church to know that sort of experience, where you can write this wonderful sermon out, but as the Spirit moves you, it certainly will shift in terms of how you think about, because if we're going to be relevant, if we're going to be interesting, if we're going to keep the boys curious, then we have to have the pulse of listening to their voices, and often missing from planning curriculum and instruction and delivering instruction is the voices of students. So it matters that we tap into what are they interested in, and how do we bring to fruition their interests, their desires. And so while I have a plan, I know that that plan can certainly, it needs to be flexible. The same thing that I teach to teacher candidates, that while you may have a lesson plan that's aligned beautifully with standards and it's grounded in powerful assessments, unless it's grounded in organically the students' experiences, the lesson can go certainly in any number of ways. And so I'm open to that. And so I have this very loose structure, but I know that as I think about what's happening out in the world, that's going to shape, inform, and guide the activities for the spring, and certainly going forward. And so we are looking forward to continuing to work with the 9th graders and preparing them as we ready ourselves for the next cohort of 8th graders.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wright. Thank you for those of you who are live with us today, and thank you also to those of you who will be watching this recording. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me and I can connect you with the right party. It's matt.walker@memphis.edu. And just wanted to thank you again for your time this morning, and hope everybody has a happy holiday season and a happy New Year. Thank you.